Welcome to Marketing Blabs. This podcast is brought to you by Marketing Labs, an expert digital marketing agency based in Nottinghamshire. If you're a business owner or marketing professional looking for straightforward, non-salesy tips and advice to help grow your business online, then this podcast is for you. Strap in because we're about to reveal the things that other agencies would rather you didn't know. Hello, and welcome to episode number 26 of the Marketing Blabs podcast. I'm your host today, Tom Haslam, and the creative director here at Marketing Labs. A slow or clunky website can be a major turn-off for potential customers, but with the right techniques, you can turn your site into a conversion machine. Today, we'll discuss some of the most common techniques and strategies to get your website firing on all cylinders. Joining me on today's Blab is Nick Janaway, our head of digital. How you doing, Nick?
Hey, Tom.
You ready for it?
Mm.
As always. We've also got Matt Janaway, our CEO. How you doing, Matt?
Yeah, pretty good.
Enjoying the vibe in the room?
Loving it. It's nice.
Last but not least, Josh Stapleton.
Hi, how are we doing?
Feels like deja vu, this.
It does.
Why?
I'm not sure. My
Because-
camera's definitely recording though, so
Someone wasn't recording the first time around we tried this, were they, Josh?
I'll hold my hands up. I made a mistake. It does happen occasionally.
How are you doing anyway?
Yeah, really good.
Full on burger.
Yeah, if my stomach's making noise, like we might have to mute the mics and things.
Fair enough. Anyway, should we get going?
Mm.
Nice. Okay. So, first off, I want to try and understand what success actually means when it comes to optimizing your website for success. Like, every business will have different objectives. So, who wants to kick off on that side?
It's always about defining first, isn't it? No matter what you do, you need to understand what your goals might be. So, an e-commerce website, the goals would be very different to a service-led website. Might change things if you're in B2B versus direct-to-consumer. So, yeah, first about defining your goals, because that will change what your website is, how it behaves, and how you push people through that journey.
I guess you have to take into account, like, if they're doing ads campaigns and things as well.
Yeah.
Like, your website changes depending on that, doesn't it?
Yeah, and where their traffic comes from. Yeah, if you run a lot of Google ads or you generate most of your traffic from SEO, they're going to land on deeper pages of the website. If you don't really have much of that, but you've got a strong brand, chances are people land on the homepage and you can filter them that way. So all of these things matter in order to determine how you plan on moving people around your website to convert them. But that conversion is different for every type of website as well.
I guess landing pages are another one to add to that list. Like you might be landing on a deeper service page in the website, but you might equally say you've come from an ad or something, be in a very tailored, specific landing page designed specifically for one goal, like funnel kind of thing.
Yeah. The messaging might change completely on each one as well.
Yeah, and how you optimize that flow from landing page to, I don't know, whether it's cart or whether it's like contacting or something like that, might be different for a landing page versus different pages on the website, like service or homepage.
So when it comes to designing your website towards success, then how do you know what a business needs from its website? Like how would you go around that question?
I suppose ultimately that's defined by the business. So as Matt just mentioned, there's lots of different reasons for a website and lots of different ways that you can optimize a website. But if you're an e-commerce business, you're going to want to make sure that your products are easily findable in the first instance. So whether that's external to site or finding your products on your site, you're going to want to make sure that your users can add them to basket easily. You want to make sure that your checkout process is simple. So there's loads and loads of different ways, and obviously that will always be different depending on what your use case is. But I suppose it kind of condenses down to the same point of making it as easy as possible for your user to do what you need them to do. And as long as you do that and that's one of your primary objectives, then you can't really go wrong.
So what me, Nick and Josh all said there just sounds like a lot of words, but to actually put meaning on it, if you imagine that you're an e-commerce business, but your website is designed in a way that actually just encourages people to call, and all of the call to actions are just wrong, and you're encouraging people to take a particular action that's not right for the purpose of the website, then from an e-commerce perspective, it's not going to work. And if you do the same thing for let's just say your Marketing Labs website, and we're talking about adding a merch section, but all of the CTAs all the way around the website or visit our merch store. But actually, that's not really what we want people to do on the website. It's just not going to perform. So it's really important to align your goals with how the website is built.
Yeah, signposting people to the right place.
Yeah.
And making the user journey as simple as possible.
Yep.
I guess success or optimizing a website for success comes down to a few different things, though. We'll talk about the technical side of things a little bit later, but I want to talk about responsiveness and how responsive design improves UX and ultimately conversion rates. What does anyone want to say on that?
Yeah, I'll take this. So I guess responsiveness, for people that don't know, is a website responding to size differences. So you might have like your mobile device and your desktop device. The screens are basically portrait versus landscape, and your website needs to be able to behave correctly on both of those sizes. So generally people tend to take like a mobile first approach when they're developing a website nowadays, because the majority of people are actually browsing on mobile. Maybe in some industries that might be a little bit different, but generally speaking. And if you're not if you're not making your site accessible on mobile, like you're not allowing a huge demographic of people to easily interact with it or like buy your products or see your services, whatever it might be. So having it responsive, working just as well on mobile as it does desktop, there's massive potential. Generally speaking, most people's sites, if they're built recently, like they've got like modern best practices, they should be pretty responsive out of the box. But if you've got an old site and it's not been updated in a while, if it was built like 10 years ago or maybe longer, hopefully not, you might find some pages just aren't as easy to navigate or easy to interact with.
Has anyone come across a non-responsive website recently?
I have, yeah. We were looking for carpets for the pod room last week. I think I found 7 local businesses. 2 of them had just static websites.
Really?
Yeah.
I think that's quite uncommon these days, to be fair.
It is quite uncommon. I suppose they're probably sole traders and do it's small business.
You tend to find it quite a lot with like smaller businesses. Maybe it's the kind of people that I don't know, we've made comments on this before, where people will think a website is like a one purchase kind of thing, and it's like, we've bought it, we've got a website, that's it forever.
Yeah.
And it's like, that thing's been sat there for 15 years.
Yeah.
It still looks like it was born in the 90s or whatever. It still has the code that it had in the 90s. And
So you know what's interesting? I was looking at some stats in prep for this podcast, and 57% of all web users wouldn't recommend a company if they didn't have a responsive website.
That's quite interesting.
Just
like mobile accessible.
Yeah, mobile accessible. Yeah. So if their website wasn't mobile accessible, chances are they wouldn't recommend them.
That's a big chunk. To be fair.
Yeah. So that goes outside of just using the website. That's about your brand. That's about your business.
The impact that is going to have on someone initially is quite important. You mentioned coding or outdated code. What impact does coding have on website optimization and performance? I know you have a go at me quite a lot about...
That's a pretty big can of worms, but...
Put code there, don't put code there. Make it really neat.
Josh's biggest beef is that you do things by eye instead of with...
But that's because my eye is class. Most of the time.
I don't know. Personally, I prefer doing, like, aligning things mathematically versus optically. And there's an argument for both, I'll give you that, but I don't know. My way's better.
Can I just add, your eye wasn't that class this week when you got plaster in it.
Moving on.
Hang on, you asked me a question about how code affects, or how code can affect.
In its simplest form, without opening that can.
In its simplest form, I'll just peel a little bit of the can away. Okay. So code, if it's old, it's probably unoptimized. Like if you've got something that was written, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago, there's probably newer, better ways to do it nowadays. Maybe there's a different library of code that works better, is more optimized, runs quicker, and people will be using that library now, but back when your site was built, maybe they weren't using that, or maybe it didn't even exist. So keeping on top of updates when packages and things are getting changed around and new stuff becomes available, better stuff becomes available, definitely helps optimize. You've also, so that's just like to do with updates and things like that. In terms of actually optimizing code, there's various tools you can do that. I mean, caching is just one off the bat. Having all your pages and things like that cached, having CSS minified. For people that don't understand code, this might sound a little bit weird. So CSS is your style sheets, and having those compressed, I guess, for lack of a better word, makes them easier to send over the web and makes things quicker.
You don't let people in your style sheets?
I prefer not to, yeah.
Keep people locked out, don't you?
I do.
Can I add as well that technology changes over time? So internet protocols change, how security works changes, how browsers work changes. I mean, we'll all know that every week or so there'll be an update to Google Chrome, to whatever browser you use. That's all to keep on top of technology changes. So the websites themselves and the content management systems and the platforms, they all have to keep up with it as well. And to add an extra layer of complexity, so does the server. So they might be on, let's just say PHP, for example, but the latest version of the content management system might need PHP 8.3, but it was built on PHP 8. So all of that, again, sort of comes back to Josh's point about maintaining it.
Yeah, it's quite an important one that we talk about quite a lot. So I want to move on to, we talk about site speed quite a lot. And there's a stat for you here. 47% of users expect a website to load in 2 seconds or less. So that in itself is quite important. But what do you think the main consequences are of a slow loading website?
People are intolerant to that now, aren't they? It's become normal for websites to work very quickly. And I think that's a good thing broadly. So if you've got a website that isn't as fast as your competitors, for example, users probably will prefer to use your competitors because they expect that from websites. They get that everywhere else on the web.
And web users are lazy as well, aren't they? This is the thing.
We all are.
Yeah.
There's quite a lot that plays into this one, though, that I always think is that let's take that use case of the website is just slow, but they're on an even poorer broadband or internet connection. That's probably going to be times by 2.
Well, it's all the
maybe
more
even
reason,
more.
actually. Outside of the UK, more so. Where in places like America, where they don't by default have unlimited internet and things like that, the heavier your website is, the more of their data you're using. So specifically Google have an agenda against this for the right reasons, but mostly for the US audience because it's just using all their data up. You come back to a large image, for example, an image that's 10 megabytes versus an image that's 100 kilobytes, 100 times the size, and that's using people's data up as they're browsing your website.
Yeah, images are a great one, actually. And going back to the slow internet speed, that's another one that is going to annoy users. And you might not even notice this yourself if your internet's quicker. So say you've got like full fiber connection or whatever, you're going to your site, it's loading like really quickly. You're absolutely chuffed about that. But someone down the road who's on like still copper lines, theirs is taking absolutely ages to load. And unless you're aware of the potential of image sizes, also file sizes, like different files that are being served, like you could actually be making a certain demographic bounce from your website just by them having slower internet.
You mentioned as well, Josh, earlier that the stats around mobile, and obviously lots of mobile traffic is on devices that are 4G or less potentially as well. So that's a significant factor in speed. So there's a lot to bear in mind with that. It's not just a case of my laptop works brilliantly. It does for everyone else. You need to be aware of lots of the variables. There you go.
Yeah. Just another stat for you. Every second delay in page load time can result in a 7% reduction in conversions.
Yeah, so I think that was Amazon's own stats, if I've read rightly. So Amazon themselves have tested that. I would argue, actually, the impact of that for Amazon is probably less than your average business.
Yeah.
I dare say every second for an average business makes a bigger difference than that. I think Google had some stats on this a few years ago, and I can't remember what they were, but I think it was something like 20%.
It's been interesting. Josh, you touched on content and images and things like that. If you're taking into account video content as well, what role does content play when it comes to website optimization, and how would you create better content for both UX and conversion rates when it comes to site speed and performance?
I'll handle video separately because we can also talk about like written content and things like that. Video, I guess, generally speaking, you want to be careful with video. Like a lot of people would want to use it and have like a video autoplay or something like that. Not really good. This is less so optimization, but it's probably worth touching on anyway. It's like maybe don't have it autoplay and have like volume on and things like that because people get annoyed by it and Google gets annoyed by it. If you're having something in a hero section, this is one that I see quite often, is like they'll have a video, maybe like drone footage or whatever it may be, in a hero section, first thing that loads on the page. If you're loading a huge video file, like multiple tens of megabytes, that's going to be impacting your performance. Like you want to make sure, although it's the first thing people are seeing, you probably want it to be quite heavily compressed and like a small file size so that it's loading quickly. And if people want to see like a fancy video, have a fancy video later on in the page and have that loaded dynamically, like after you've actually loaded the page. So yeah, keeping the page size small is probably the main thing to touch on there.
I guess it's about balance, isn't it? In terms of making the site optimal from a speed and performance perspective. But when it comes down to UX and conversion rates, according to HubSpot, 72% of people would rather learn about a product via video. So there's an argument to say that, imagine every page has video on it. How's that going to impact a site?
You can have both, though. I'm sure Josh will go into the technicalities of this and is better explaining it than me. But having the video load later on in the sequence, so calling it later once the core, the first above the fold kind of thing loads first.
Yeah.
There's lots of ways of doing kind of lazy load or calling things afterwards or loading images and then playing on click or there's loads of ways of making that page weight reduce until there's an action that's completed. And and that you can kind of have the best of both worlds in that instance. Or like Josh said, you could do something on different kind of dimensions. So whether you played a full video or play a video on a laptop, but maybe not on mobile, for example. And maybe the user clicks to play on mobile. So there's lots of different ways of approaching that I'm sure Josh will go into.
To be fair, you've covered most of it there. So the things I were going to touch on, you've already touched on.
Sorry,
but
Josh.
Having them, say on your product page, for example, on your product page, you could have the video as the last image in the carousel. Well, not image, it's a video. But you go through all the images and then, oh, look, there's a video.
Yeah.
That's not had to load as soon as the page is loaded. That's loaded, 5, 10 seconds, 20 seconds after you've looked through all the other images.
Yeah.
So that's not affecting like your load time. People aren't going to bounce off of the page because of that.
Yeah.
With the example with it being a hero section, like my best advice there is have the video just be short and like compressed because that is loading straight away.
Yeah.
And it could be impacting load speed. So you want that to be as fast as it possibly can be.
I was going to say, I want to drop in a pet peeve of mine, actually, now, is I'm not suggesting that you shouldn't have video on hero images or at the top of pages. Maybe I am a tiny bit, but sometimes it's okay. My biggest pet peeve is when those videos actually just have no purpose. Like, what's the point? And even more so when they're just so long and they're on like this long reel that's like a minute long and nobody's sat there watching it. Like they're just going to scroll down. So it's just completely unnecessary. I don't think that adds to UX at all.
Well, what's also important to realise there is, say you have got this large hero video playing, you might have a H1 in there. You've definitely not got much content in there. So you're actually pushing other important information below the fold by having that.
Information that helps convert as well, by the way. So we're talking about content here, we're talking about video.
Yeah.
But in a minute, I guess we'll be moving on to other types of content. And what, in my opinion, one of the biggest benefits of what your content is and how it's written and the messaging is for users and how it converts them and explains what it is that the purpose, I guess, of the page and the website. And the best way of doing that is with words still, because it's just a quick, okay, this is the header, it's clear what we do.
I'm going to argue with you that I disagree.
Yeah.
Because not everyone likes to read.
No.
Most people consume visually.
Yep.
So if we use an example of a website that we launched recently,
Yep.
Connect Storage Systems, they've got a video in the hero.
Yep.
And I'd look at that as opposed to the text.
Yeah, but okay, so the call to action on that, what if the button didn't have any text on?
Well, I wouldn't do that. I would put a button on the text.
Well, that's why the text is important.
The text is important from a button perspective, but not the descriptive words that you're saying.
Okay, what if you landed on that website, you didn't know what they did?
That's a good point. I've been on a few sites where I've, say a client has said, oh, let's have a look, can you have a look at our site or something like that? Or not a client, a potential client has said, can you have a look at our site? And without having any background on them, I'll go to the website and I'll literally flick through maybe 2 or 3 pages and still be unaware what they actually do. Like they'll have very vague language or like very niche industry terms that maybe a layman wouldn't understand. And yeah, having that kind of experience when you hit a site isn't ideal. So if you've just got a video there and a very niche heading,
or no heading even,
or no,
No, I think I'm arguing the fact that there should be both. There should definitely be a video.
It depends on the video, though, doesn't it?
If the video adds value.
Going back to your product page thing, that's a great place for it because
100%, yeah.
Videos
like a product
sell.
explainer.
Videos really sell.
Yeah. I think from a service business perspective, though, if you're showing everything that you do in one video, you're going to show off your services and the way you work straight away, aren't you?
Like a show reel.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I just think there's a place for it. And in my opinion, I don't think it's in that hero image. Do you know, was it me and you, Nick, that was looking at this? It might have been me and you, actually, Tom. Incredibly well done video for me. One of the best I've seen in ages was on the DJI website.
Yeah, that is
Do
good.
you know on the VR drone?
Yeah,
it was
class.
on that. We were looking at that recently, and they've got such a fantastic video further down the product page that actually really does sell it so well.
But going an extra level to that, they have theirs in the hero, but also on a slider with specific messaging for that video.
It's quite
so
short.
It's all relevant.
Oh yeah, it is relevant.
They're a prime example of it done well. Like
Yeah.
they're using great messaging and great video,
Yeah.
like together, and it's
Snappy and short though.
Yeah.
That's the thing. It's no one's going to sit there watching it.
No.
The longer video further down the page that's like 15 minutes long, people will click and watch that.
The other thing though is if the video is short, people will sit there and watch it.
Yeah.
People have got a short attention span these days.
they have.
But if you're watching a 10-second clip of a guy snowboarding down a mountain, you're like, okay, that's pretty cool. And then 10 seconds are up, you're like, oh, this guy's surfing now.
Yeah.
I think we'll agree to disagree on some elements, but I think
it's just a balancing act.
That's exactly what I was going to say. All right, so we've discussed image and video content a little bit, but what about written content? How does that affect optimization of a website?
Affects a lot, doesn't it? Actually, written content. So it affects how you're perceived as a brand. It affects how your website might be optimized and how useful it is from an SEO perspective, how you can be found. It affects conversions, how you push people through to the right page and on that conversion journey. Yeah, it does a big job, actually. A very big job.
I think the same rules apply, don't they, as to content as they do video. Like it needs to serve a purpose. Like if you're just putting content there for content's sake, then it's going to do no one any good.
Not be too big.
Yeah.
Same with video.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, be streamlined, be purposeful, match the intent, or answer the questions that the user is looking for, or whatever the purpose is on your website, and just make sure you do a good job. And then if you can always optimize, and you can always try and enhance, and you can always change and tweak. That's absolutely fine, but it needs to serve a purpose, and that's the same with all content that you have on your website.
Intent again. So we're 20 odd minutes in, and that's the first mention of intent. But actually, arguably for this whole topic again, it's one of the most important things for content specifically. Like you've got to match what people want, otherwise your page just isn't going to work very well.
I think written content is the most important thing, if anything. Obviously, everything's got to look nice, it's got to feel nice, you've got to get people to the right place. But first of all, if your content's not SEO optimized, then it's not going to get found by Google and not going to get crawled properly. And if it doesn't answer the question of the user, then you're nowhere to be seen, are you?
No.
So
Also, if it's not digestible, like if it's just a wall of text, no one's reading that.
No.
Like it wants to be easy to understand, easy to read.
Yeah.
Consumable. Yeah.
I think those two things are almost interchangeable now anyway, Tom.
Yeah.
So like, if something's not fit for user, you're probably not going to rank very well anyway,
To a
even
certain
if
degree.
it's SEO optimized.
Yeah.
So.
The other way round, maybe less so, but that way round, absolutely, yeah. I mean, you can have something that's good for SEO, potentially good for SEO that's terrible for the user, but like Nick said, it wouldn't perform. But you could have something that's great for the user, but not very good for SEO, and it might not be found. So we're always advocates, aren't we, of UX first, really. There should be very little, if anything, that you would say that has to be done for SEO that would damage UX.
No.
It's not really it's not been a thing. That's not been a thing for ages.
No, I think there's some interesting points there. One last thing I want to touch on this side is any common mistakes to avoid when designing for mobile. I'll kick off with one. Is text been too small in buttons?
Yeah.
Or buttons too close together and things like that. But I don't know if anyone else has got any others.
I've got a big one. We used to see this all the time when Google first moved to mobile indexing, mobile crawling, is when websites remove elements entirely from the mobile view of their site. So we had a client who removed, I think it was their long description from their product pages on mobile because for exactly that reason, they didn't want a wall of text. The best way of dealing with that is to say, well, why have we got this wall of text and how can we improve it? Not let's remove it. Because when Google started crawling their website, the mobile version of their website, they lost so many keyword rankings because they removed half of the content on the page or more than it that Google understood to drive users to the website. So yeah, absolutely. You need to make sure that you're displaying the information that's relevant to users still, but you have to display it in a way that works for them.
Yeah,
you can't just have a wall of text like Josh says,
and works for the device as well.
The device, yeah.
I mean, a really quick way to solve that one is just whacking it in an accordion.
Absolutely, yeah.
And then your text is there, but it's also hidden, and you can easily expand it and see it.
Yep.
Right. So we've touched a little bit on content, conversion rates, optimizing for better UX, things like that. What about the technical side for website success? Like how do technical aspects of a website impact optimization?
Well, you could start anywhere with this. This is a massive, massive area, but ultimately there are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of signals that you pass to browsers, to search engines, and they're all technical signals that have an impact on various things. So, for example, you mentioned hreflang there. That's one of many, many, many things that could impact a website's performance and usability. But what hreflang does is if you've got multiple versions of your website in different locations, it ensures that you're telling search engines which one is right for users in different locations. So let's just say you've got a UK and a US version. The hreflang, they point to each other and they basically say, this is the UK version, this is the US version. And then Google in the US would show the US version, in the UK would show the UK version. But if you got that wrong, not only would people be visiting the wrong version of the page for the wrong location, which could, by the way, also be a different language, but also you're losing out on the right people finding your website in the first place. So it's not great for SEO, but terrible for user experience. But there's hundreds of those examples.
Canonicals.
Good one.
You can tackle this one then, Nick.
What, canonicals?
Yeah, I just did hreflangs.
No.
I think there's lots to talk about from a technical optimization perspective. We would look at lots of different things when we're putting a technical audit together, wouldn't we?
It depends what you're optimizing for as well, and there's a variety of different aspects to that. It could be SEO, it could be speed, it could be a server setup, it could be loads and loads of things like Matt said. All of those things will be slightly different for each of those purposes. So, yeah, you can't cover that all in one question, unfortunately. But
in fact, each one of those is probably its own podcast. I mean, you could go into like pagination. That wouldn't impact B2B business websites, but it would e-commerce.
Yeah.
And pagination, each page when you're on an e-commerce store and you see sort of page 1, 2, 3, 4 in a category, each one of those should self canonicalize to itself, but also really should have a bit of code that says previous and next. So Google understand the relationships between those pages. Common mistake there is a lot of websites will canonicalize back to the page 1. And that doesn't really help search engines understand. Google have said in the last year or two that they can sort of understand that anyway, so it's not necessarily something you need to do. But we have seen that when it isn't implemented properly, Google struggle.
Yeah.
So again, that's, as Nick says, that wouldn't impact some websites and it would others.
Yeah. Have you got anything to say on the technical side, Josh?
Not so much like SEO technical stuff, I guess. I mean, most of the stuff I'm thinking of just goes back to like how a website's built. I was actually tempted to bring this one up in the last question that you had. This is maybe not so much a common mistake for your general like website admin, but it's more so the person that's putting the site together or like developing pages and things like that. And that's developing pages for mobile and developing pages for desktop, or developing a single page that works on both, but having some elements, as Matt mentioned a minute ago, be visible on mobile or desktop or vice versa. And I mean, it is a way to do it. I mean, not hiding things, don't do that. But it is a way to do it, like have two different designs in mind. But generally, you want to be actually making something that works on all sizes, and it's just the one design. And to do that, you do need to have a bit of a grasp of how responsive layouts work and how you can change the position of certain items and things like that on the page. But doing it effectively and in the smallest amount of code possible, like HTML code, like actual elements on page, can make a big difference.
Nice. I'll go for one.
Go on then.
Massive logos.
Oh, and headers.
Yeah, massive logos and headers.
I thought you were
like
going
a
to say
white
canonicals.
No more technical things for me. I'm burnt out.
Lack of white space,
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
like cramming things together.
Nothing worse, is there? Got to let the design breathe and the content breathe.
Well, that's another point, actually, because that enables the content. We spent a good section talking about why content's important.
Yeah.
If you don't let it breathe and it's not enabled, it just looks like it's all there.
Yeah.
Goes back to it being digestible.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Nice. All right, quickly, we talk about technical aspects of a website, and we obviously do technical SEO audits. But if somebody out there wanted to just check the technical side of their website quickly and just get a few tips, are there any tools out there that people can use?
Yeah, it depends what you need to do, I suppose, and what you're looking for again, which is a little bit of a sit on the fence answer. But for SEO, for example, you could use something like GT Metrics that has a solution that can test speed.
Yeah.
Although if you have to you don't have to pay for it if you want the more thorough version of that. You could use Search Console as an example. If you have that on your site, that will give you quite a lot of information about a variety of aspects, actually, not just SEO, but how users find your website, how users interact with your website to a degree, and then how their experience of your website as well. And there's a lot of paid tools as well, which you wouldn't necessarily have to buy, but obviously you can do. So things like SEMrush. It's quite expensive if depending on which package you get and depending on what you need it for. So it might not be the right solution for everybody, but those detailed tools that offer a variety of different ways of analysing your website, I think can be quite a good way of checking lots of things. And then there's tools that aren't necessarily technical, but also do provide value. So things like user testing, for example, can be fantastic for websites.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Just understanding actually people who have no bias towards your product or your website, actually what do they think? Do they find it easy to use? Are things where they was expecting to find them? That can be incredibly valuable for optimization.
UX especially, not so much SEO, but how people are interacting.
How people respond, you can ask specific questions, can't you? Like, was it easy to find out what we did?
And watch their sessions. You can say, can you try and find this or do this? And you can literally watch
set
them
specific
try.
tasks.
Yeah. They were really useful tools that Nick's just put there. I've got a couple I could add to that as well. So the first one, Microsoft Clarity.
Yep.
I think Microsoft Clarity is decent. It's a little bit, the JavaScript's a little bit heavy, so you wouldn't put it on a website with, I don't think you should really at least, put it on a website that's on, let's say, a budget server or isn't particularly well optimized. However, it's incredibly useful for lots of things like that. So I'd highly recommend that. Goes without saying, even though a lot of people, there's less affinity for this product now than there used to be, but Google Analytics, you gather a lot of data from that as well for free. So same with Clarity's free as well, by the way. So finally, Nick mentioned Google Search Console, which is, I think it's probably one of the most underused SEO tools there is. I think it gives you so much great information. But also Microsoft Search Console, Webmaster Tools, as it's called, is very similar to Google's, but it also gives you quite a lot more data. Gives you less data-based. The advantage of Google Search Console is it gives you Google data on how many impressions you're getting for your pages and keywords and so on. Microsoft still does give you that, but obviously there's much less volume. However, the other tools it gives you on crawling and things is better than Google Search Console. So I really recommend that.
Nice.
One similar to what Nick mentioned, user testing. So instead of paying for user testing, you can also install something like Hotjar, which is able to monitor how people are interacting with your site. You can literally see their mouse moving around and see hotspots and things like that, which is pretty handy. Some for more technical, codey kind of related things. I don't actually have one off the top of my head for this, but I'm sure they are available, is something that can check whether your page is using semantic HTML. And that basically means whether HTML tags on your site are used correctly. So H1 through to H6 for your headers, P tags for your paragraphs, anchors for your links, nav, footer, body, all the rest of them. If they're not used correctly, that can throw Google off quite heavily. Like if it's looking for a nav element and can't find a nav, that's going to be hindering you massively. And another one, we can probably find a link for this one, but I don't know off the top of my head. Google brought out a text and color and background kind of accessibility checker, which is allowing you to put in your brand colors, for example, and it will tell you whether your primary color and your secondary color, for example, or your text colors work accessibly. So if the text is too dark and the button is too dark, you might not be able to see it very well. And Google can see things like this and also not very fond of those things.
Nice.
Lighthouse is also quite good for that as well, which is free. They've
For
got
access-
quite a lot of
Yeah.
There's quite a lot of tests as part of the Lighthouse platform that would do a variety of different tests like that.
GTmetrix might have that as well, specifically the color stuff. Another one on that actually, again, these will probably do it too, but is font sizes. Like if you're, maybe not all of your text on your page is tiny, but sometimes you might have some bits that are really small and yeah, it's not good. People can't read it. I've got another one actually, another tool, or kind of a tool service, I guess, is CDN, Content Delivery Network. So you can offload a load of your heavy assets on your server to a CDN and it makes things get sent to your users quicker. Really good for optimizing speed.
Nice.
Sorry to prolong this. I think I wanted to say something a couple of minutes ago, actually, and Josh has just reminded me. The purpose of all of these tools is to test.
Yeah.
So I know we've mentioned this a lot. It's probably the thing we mention second most behind intent is test. Just test everything. All of these give you data, but unless you're testing, that data isn't that important. So you've got to test everything you possibly can to just continually try and improve.
Nice. Some good insights there. I've enjoyed it. Have you enjoyed it? Cheers, Nick. Cheers, Matt.
It's all right, anytime.
Cheers, Josh.
You're very welcome, Tom.
Would everyone like to just wave at the camera? So that's all the time we have for today. Thanks to the ML team for sharing their expertise on website optimization. Today we covered the importance of speed, mobile friendliness, and technical optimization. We learned that even the smallest changes can make a big impact on UX and conversion rates. From optimizing images to streamlining code, we explored the key strategies to get your website sprinting towards success. Remember to take action on these tips and start optimizing your website today. Tune in next time for more insights and expert advice on Marketing Blabs. Bye for now.